All right, let's just dive right into this. When you hear the words ancient Greek epic, what actually pops into your head? If you're like most people, you're probably picturing dusty textbooks, maybe some crumbling marble statues, and let's be honest, a really long, really dry lecture. But today, we're going to look at Richmond Lattimore's brilliant translation and analysis of Homer's Odyssey. We're going to completely reframe the whole thing. We aren't looking at this as some dusty old poem today. We're going to examine the Odyssey as a mind-bending, big-budget cinematic thriller. Because honestly, the narrative techniques we absolutely love in modern movies, well, Homer practically invented them. So picture this. The lights go down in the theater. The screen is pitch black. And then we get this massive cold open, with a voice booming literally from the heavens. It's the god Zeus delivering this line. It is the earth encircler Poseidon who, ever relentless, nurses a grudge, drives him back from the land of his fathers. I mean, just imagine a huge Hans Zimmer bass drop right after that, and you've got the absolute perfect movie trailer hook. Right out of the gate, Homer is establishing this epic scale and a massive inciting incident. Our hero is actively being hunted by a god. And you really have to consider the sheer scale of the architecture we're dealing with here. We're talking over 12,000 lines of poetry, all broken down into 24 books. But the crazy part is, Homer doesn't just give us a straight, boring line from point A to point B. He gives us a fractured timeline. The narrative architecture here is exactly what you'd expect from a modern Christopher Nolan film. It plays with time, it jumps perspectives, and it forces the audience to constantly piece the puzzle together themselves. It really is the greatest movie never filmed. So let's treat this beautiful cover of Lattimore's translation as our official movie poster for the ultimate epic. Our protagonist, of course, is Odysseus. Now, he's a hardened veteran of a brutal 10-year war at Troy. But as our story opens, he has literally lost everything. He's lost all his ships, he's lost his men, he's lost all his treasure. He is completely trapped, secretly and alone, far away from his home country of Ithaca. So the stakes? They're intensely personal, and the odds are just impossibly high. Now, every summer blockbuster needs a killer cast and crew, right? And Lattimore's analysis makes it super easy to cast our players. Our leading man is Odysseus, naturally. Our relentless antagonist is the sea god Poseidon. But look at our B-plot star here, his son, Telemachus. And then there's the master of suspense waiting back home, Penelope. But honestly, the most crucial role on this list is the goddess Athena. You really have to think of Athena as the secret director and executive producer of this entire film. As Lattimore points out, the whole action of the Odyssey is approved, authorized, and heavily encouraged by Athena. She is the one sitting in the director's chair, calling action on this entire plot. All right, so let's get right into Act 1, starting in the middle. You know, a lesser storyteller would just start the movie chronologically at year 1, but not Homer. He makes this brilliant structural choice to start the story in media res, basically dropping us right smack into the middle of the labyrinth. If you look at this fractured timeline, it really illustrates the sheer audacity of Homer's pacing. Chronologically, Odysseus spends 10 years fighting a war, and then nearly another 10 years just wandering and suffering. It's a 20-year saga, but Homer begins the actual narrative in year 20. We drop in during the 10th year of his wanderings, with events rapidly accelerating toward their climax. And here's the real kicker. When the movie starts, the camera isn't even pointing at our leading man. Instead, Athene, our brilliant director, intentionally shifts the camera over to the B-plot. She basically says, "But I shall make my way to Asaga so that I may stir up his son a little and make a statement to all the suitors." So we actually spend the first 4 books, this whole section known as the Telemachy, following Odysseus' son, Telemachus. And why do that? Because you have to establish the stakes. By showing us these awful, greedy suitors just destroying Odysseus' home and actively plotting to murder his son, Homer builds up this incredible, desperate need for the hero to return. We are practically screaming at the screen for Odysseus to come back and clean house. Which brings us perfectly into Act 2, the flashback sequence. So, when we finally do meet Odysseus, he manages to escape his captors, washes ashore among the Phaeacian people, and then, in a truly masterful cinematic transition, Odysseus himself takes over the narrative. He sits down at a banquet, and boom, we launch into this epic first-person flashback covering the entire last decade of his life. And what's super fascinating about this flashback is the massive shift in tone. Lattimore notes that while Ithaca and the normal Greek world feel like very grounded political realities, kind of like practical effects in a movie, the great wanderings that Odysseus describes are just pure CGI wonderworld. Suddenly, we're totally off the map. We're dealing with magic fruit from the lotus eaters, supernatural giants, trips to the land of the dead, and those monstrous sirens. It is just pure, unfiltered imagination. And of course, you can't have a CGI Wonderworld without monsters. Which brings us to one of the most famous monsters in movie history, Polyphemus the Cyclops. Now, as Lattimore points out, the Greek word kyklops actually just means round-eyed. But Homer took these existing older myths and just completely amplified them for maximum blockbuster effect, ensuring we picture Polyphemus as this terrifying one-eyed giant. And more importantly, blinding this specific giant is the exact inciting incident that brings the wrath of Poseidon crashing down on Odysseus. It's basically the ultimate cause and effect storytelling.
Moving right along to Act 3, the unreliable narrator.
So the big flashback ends, and Odysseus finally hitches a ride back to his home island of Ithaca. But it doesn't turn into this joyous, sweeping reunion scene with soaring music. Oh no, it turns into a really dark, tense psychological thriller. Athena disguises Odysseus as this old, tattered beggar, which completely shifts the tone. And that raises a really huge question. Why on earth does the hero lie to his own allies? Because once he's back on Ithaca, Odysseus tells 5 different, incredibly detailed, completely false stories about his identity. He lies to the loyal swineherd Eumaeus. He lies to the suitors. He lies to his own father. And he even lies to his own wife, Penelope. Now, Lattimore notes these stories are very grounded in real geography. No monsters this time. But why tell them at all?
Well, he does it because he's operating in deep cover. Just imagine this classic, legendary Greek warrior, completely stripped of his armor, literally hiding in plain sight in a beggar's rags. He is vastly outnumbered by 108 armed suitors who absolutely want him dead. He can't trust anyone, not even his own family, until he thoroughly tests their loyalty. It turns the whole epic into this agonizing guessing game, just packed with suspense. We, the audience, know exactly who he is, and you have to sit there and watch him sit across from his grieving wife, maintaining this fake persona while she literally cries over his supposed death. It is just brutal, brilliant tension.
And that tension leads us right to Act 4, a slow burn climax. Now look, if this were just some cheap, run-of-the-mill action movie, Odysseus would just kick open the doors of his palace with a sword in each hand and start swinging, right? And actually, early in the story, his son Telemachus has a daydream of that exact cheap action movie playing out. He's imagining in his mind his great father, how he might come back and all throughout the house might cause the suitors to scatter. It's a very quick, clean, heroic tableau. But as Lattimore really emphasizes, Homer knows that's just over too quickly. Delaying the climax is a core part of the epic technique. The reality of the slaughter that Athene and Odysseus are quietly orchestrating is so much darker, so much slower, and way more calculating than a teenager's daydream.
Let's actually break down the anatomy of this suspense. Homer intentionally writes these leisurely drawn-out chapters where talk is predominant. Penelope is playing this desperate waiting game, never fully committing to any of the suitors. Meanwhile, Odysseus is quietly, meticulously building a secret alliance with his son and just 2 loyal servants. He's subtly testing the suitors, literally letting them mock him and throw furniture at him, just absorbing their abuse to fully justify the violence that's coming. And then finally, very quietly, the loyal servants lock the doors to the courtyard. It is literally those quiet, dread-filled moments right before a bomb goes off.
And what triggers that bomb? It's triggered by the ultimate movie prop. This bow and quiver is basically the literal Chekhov's gun of classical literature. Penelope brings out Odysseus's great stiff bow for a contest, and when the disguised Odysseus finally gets his hands on it, strings it effortlessly, and plucks the strings so it sings like a swallow, the visual promise of violence is fulfilled. The trap is sprung. There's no going back. And the payoff? It is just devastatingly cinematic. Homer adopts all these brutal combat formulas from the Iliad, but uses them for this really tight, chaotic, indoor massacre. As the suitor Amphinomus charges forward, he's struck down, and Homer writes, he fell thunderously and took the earth full on his forehead. It's visceral, it's bloody, and it is the absolute ultimate revenge sequence. It's the moment that the entire 20-year timeline, all the B-plots, and all that agonizing suspense have been building toward since line 1. So when you look at the structure, the pacing, and the just incredible narrative control that Homer wields, it's honestly impossible to just see a dusty old poem anymore, isn't it? It is a total masterclass in nonlinear suspense, practical versus digital world building, and deep cover tension. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question. If the Odyssey is secretly the greatest blockbuster thriller ever plotted, what other ancient texts are just sitting right there on our shelves, waiting to be read with a cinematic eye? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep looking closely at the stories that built our world.